Welcome to Coached Soul, a podcast for a better you. Your host, Steve Hudgens, is a licensed professional counselor. On a non-emergency basis, you may contact them at area code 918-280-8690 or coachsoul.com to provide them with new topics, feedback, or to request an appearance on the show. And now, here's your host, Steve Hudgens.
All right, welcome back to Coach Soul. What a great podcast about internal dialogue with women. And Kenya, you brought some truth. What a great segue to lead into this one about
that was
what
very
is
exciting.
truth.
What is truth? So, Steve,
well, yeah.
I want to invite you to relax, take the back seat. I'm interviewing you right now, hon. Let's go.
All right, spotlight is on.
Tell me about the voices in your head, the thoughts that comes in the internal dialogue as a male.
You know, as a man, it is difficult sometimes because I look at what year are you wanting me to talk about in my head?
True.
You know, because
so can you start with the not so evolved version of yourself to really relate to the listener? Like before you went to psychology and all the things that you've been through, when you were a beautiful, regular man, how was it?
When I think about my childhood, it was composed of a father who was in military. So there you put the structure that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have my mother who was a stay-at-home, and there were some issues there. So now I have that wound as perfectionism. I had to dress a certain way. I couldn't have holes in my jeans. My mom would patch them up. So the internal dialogue affected my self-esteem. And so some certain events that I won't go into, but these events of guilt, shame, discipline affected my internal dialogue of self-esteem. So I remember living in Texas where it was hell hot, and then moving to South Dakota where hell freezes over. The two different contrasts, that played in the viewpoint of who I am, because you go through bright sun, and sometimes South Dakota, you get those deep winter blues. And so I felt like a spoon bending back and forth in my thought processes. And I realized that I was picked on, made fun of when I was there in South Dakota and in Texas. But my dad got an assignment to go to Japan, where I went my freshman, sophomore, junior year. So now that warps another piece of me, because now I have a plethora of great friends from Japan that are still in my Facebook. And we connected 20-something years after Facebook connected. And so I'm dating my age as far as high school. But when I come back from a slow-paced environment, because often our environment for me affected my thought processes. So not only my parents' effect, but my journey effect. But in high school, I became very popular amongst some of the kids that were there. I was a yearbook editor. So what I noticed about my development was that I enjoyed the positions that I was in. So the titles gave me a definition of who I am. And
so what I hear you saying is that identity came from the titles.
There you go.
The identity came from, but tell me about the voices in your head.
It was saying that I'm not good enough unless I'm in a good place that I can have control over my environment. It was a place, for example, I became a hall monitor. And I'll admit this, because I didn't want to be outside in the cold. Why couldn't I be? And let my friends in on the inside and let them stay in one place to keep warm. I wanted to advocate for them. So there's that people pleasing thought process. So I come back to the States and I go to college. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm lost of who I am and my identity. Because I go from a slow pace of life, because 45 kilometers over there is like 20 here. And so it's half the speed, and everything changed in the United States, and everything became so fast driven that it was difficult for me and my voice to catch up.
Wow.
And
so that was a cultural shock?
Extremely cultural shock.
As well as you lost your floor.
Yes.
Of certainty, which you were highly driven by controlling uncertainty because your parents was all about control.
Correct. Yes. And so when I went to college, I'm like, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to be a business administrator? A manager. So I sought out titles. Do I want to be a CPA? And then I got into, somebody introduced me into the radio, and I became a radio host and doing interviews, but also doing the news. And so I love podcasting, not podcasting, but broadcasting over the media.
Yes.
So that's where I started that. And that started to play on my ego a little bit. So I'm substituting my outward task to define who I am.
I can see that.
And,
and the conversation in your head will go like if I do one more thing, then I'm better, I'm stronger, I have more value. I don't want to put words in your head. Can you please give our listeners a peek in what are the voices saying to you?
At that point in time, because I was like ready to jump out and be on my own because of the controlling that I had at home. But I was very intimidated by the adult world.
Yeah.
But I pushed myself. I was surprised that I pushed myself into, always thriving in my environment. I guess it's the survival mode that kicked in. All this time I've been surviving. And so I find different jobs and things like that. So I became a youth minister after graduating. I had a degree in philosophy and broadcasting. And then, of course, youth ministry. I did that and wasn't my cup of tea. So I went military. That really challenged my thinking. Why did I get into military? Or what caused me going into military? See the two difference in the questions. That's where I was going with this. I was judging myself in the actions that I was doing, but at the same time, I had no idea of what I was doing. And so that caused confusion in my mind. And then when you get into the military and you go through basic training, they kind of break you down. It's a mind game. And we were standing in formation one day and they told us to get down and do 50 push-ups because somebody messed up. And so I'm on a fire ant hill and all these ants are started coming out and I had to move. Drill sergeant's getting on to me. Drill sergeant, there's ants on me, and I've got to shake them off. And he said, go ahead and move, but next time ask permission. So it's like, now I'm being structured in my mind. But I went from thinking as a teenager, beginning to develop my thought into an adult. But I still had wounds. I just masked my wounds.
Yes.
And to mask, I thought, why not?
Well, that is a classic case of survival. In order to be accepted And to survive in society, I must appear strong, that I have my things together, that I know exactly how to be.
And one of the things that, I had empathy, but I was also a people pleaser. In the military, you cannot be a people pleaser. You're going to get yourself killed, right? And so going from there, I moved to Oklahoma with my wife and my daughter, and I became an engineer for MCI. I was working on the networking for there. And I thrived in that environment because it tapped into my logical brain of knowing how to do things. And I was very quick and very fast that I got promoted over the 6 years from a Tech 2 all the way up to Tech 4, and working from not only on a Tier 1, but a Tier 2, which is the next level up of sophistication and identifying. But Kenya, I mean, it's so easy for me to identify things outside of me, but very challenging for me to identify my own thought process on my inside. That I did not take the time to realize that I was still emotionally immature, in the fact that I had some control, and I was very selfish. It wasn't until my children were born.
Yep. That will do it.
That broke me. Not financially, right?
Well, love breaks you open if you are open to love that big. Love really breaks you open because they will show you.
And at that time, I looked at the relationship with my spouse and I, and we were like, it was getting a little hectic to where I didn't feel fit as a man because of the language that she would use. And it was attacking. Well, what did I do? I was reactive to that because of my thought process. And I went to counseling on my own to get the help that I need to start working on clarity on my thought. Why? Because I had conditioned responses and behaviors from my father and mother as growing up, and those wounds that had hit me.
So that right there, stop right there. That is what every voice speaks. Every voice that is not uplifting, that is not bathing you in truth, is bringing you, is shining, it's vibrating the wounds of the past. So listeners, if you can separate the voice, is this wound or wisdom? Is a wound or wisdom? That right there is a trick to feel like you are not the voice. And you have a say in which voice is louder or lower. Please carry on. You noticed that it was the voice of the wounds.
Yes. And I began to work on that in therapy. And when I think about these things, not only was it the past wounds, it's the current wounds that I was dealing with, but I had a hard time looking in the mirror. And in my thought processes, I'm not good enough.
Sure.
And there was a moment in time that I was being very successful, that it hit me. I don't know if God was trying to give me another direction or whatever, but that was the beginning of my journey of transformation in the year 2000, when my spouse and I divorced. The company of that I was working for, 6,000 of us got laid off in a day. And then within that time frame, 9/11 hit. So it's one thing after another, boom, 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 boom. So working in telecom, I didn't want to go to Sugar Land, Texas, because I didn't want to be away from my kids. My kids were very important to me. I fought for my kids.
What age were they?
My daughter was about 5-ish. My son was 1.5 years when they divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very hard for me because there was parental alienation syndrome happening. And to the
Yes.
listener, that is a parent that sabotages your relationship with the other parent.
Mm-hmm. Out of trying to control.
Let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
I had asked for switching of the weekend. And she says, no, you either use it or lose it. And I said, look, this is not about us. The kids need both of us. Let's switch, because I have to go down to Plano, Texas for spectrum training for telecommunications. And she says no. So then as I'm on down there and coming back on a Sunday after my training, she emailed me and says, your kids are so disappointed because I packed their bags and they're ready to go. And they're unhappy that you didn't show and you let them down.
Mm.
And the internal dialogue was really hitting me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started learning to set healthy boundaries for myself. And I began to look at, this is not healthy. So back in the day in Oklahoma, that was sole custody. And so I worked with Governor Keating at the time here in Oklahoma, stating, here are the statistics, things that need to change. Working with legislators and such, the laws got changed in Oklahoma to mandatory joint custody. I took her back to court and won custody of my children. Now, talk about a degrading moment and the challenge of my fatherhood. But then to look at the courts gave me custody of my children, showing me as a fit father, really elevated me. But I needed to be humbled about that, because I remember, there's a point in time in the court, and I said to my attorney, look, I don't want the opposite. I want us both to be equal. And he said, be quiet or the judge will give it back to her. And it's like, that challenged me as well, because I'm about the sanctity of the kids' minds and healthiness, that both parents should have shared custody.
So Steve.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of the same narrative from childhood wounds, visiting during the marriage.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. The voices are exactly the same. Did you shift from your parents to her?
So
to a female voice.
But not only in mine, but women have that too, in that internal 100%. Dialogue, right?
Exactly.
Here's the other thing that I've learned.
Being inadequate, not being good enough, not showing up. This is not it. I told you this, misinterpretation. Your goodwill is being misinterpreted. It's your words is used against you, which is manipulation. It's guilt, shame. I mean, we're all back to childhood, religion. It's all the same thing.
So here, I'm glad you pointed that out, because from there, trying to find, I got my custody of my kids back, got custody of them. And then because I was working for US West, we got bought out by CenturyLink in Louisiana. Well, when another company buys you out, the one who gets bought out gets laid off. So here we are, see that. Another layoff. The only job that I can find at this time is spraying lawns. So here I'm going from, 80 grand, so to speak, of a job down to half of my salary in spraying lawns. And I'll never forget the moment. And this is where my internal dialogue shifted for me.
Tell me more.
I'm out on this grass and I start spraying. Immaculate home. The family steps out. I'm his same age. And I'm thinking, how does he have a larger home, a wife, and 2 kids still with what he has? And yet I'm being a servant to him. And I'm spraying. What does he have that I don't have? And I thought, wait a minute, Steve, hold on. Something bigger is about to happen. if I allow it. I was beating myself up over what I could have been based upon somebody else's experience. And how much does our internal dialogue, because we want to escape from the pain, to compare? And that's when I shifted. And, there was 3 job offers that I had at the moment. And I took one that was risky. Instead of a 6-figure income or a different income working in the field that I wanted to go to, but less pay. And I chose a 6-month temp job. But because I excelled in it, they created a job and I got in and permanently with this position. And that's when my life started changing and realizing that it is me getting outside of my head and being determined to do something different. And that's when I started working on becoming a therapist.
Yeah. I also heard something different. I heard that in your childhood self, you wanted the approval from your parents.
Yes.
And by the way, Steve, this is about you and Mel, but don't we all? Like, this is a genderless, this is a neutral conversation. But again, we're focusing on male. I also heard that in the marriage, you wanted to be enough for her. For if it's, again, the looking at the reflection of outside to see if you're really worthy, to see if you're really good enough. That moment that you said shifted, you're like, wait a second, I get to be good enough for me.
Right.
I'm putting my own words what I heard you saying.
No, I mean,
that moment was a moment like the angel singing, ah,
right.
Which in my universe is, hey, Steve, you have always been perfect. You have always been whole. You have always had all the power. You have always been accepted. The acceptance that you offer outside, offer inside. As my son, you're perfect. That's God's way. That's my way of put God's words in here to say that you, listener, when you give yourself permission to shine and step into that authority that has already been given, watch miracles happen in your life. Now, carry on. Did you just say that the offers of jobs just are showing up and you decided to take control by starting your education in psychology?
Doing something, going into psychology. And one other thing that I want to interject here too, because your life is multifaceted. We wear different hats and our thought processes
all
change
the time.
All those, right? So not only did I have father-mother wound, not only did I have self-esteem issues within my own self, not only did I have trouble within my marriage, there was trouble within the church.
Oof.
And I went to the leaders and I said, I need some help in salvaging my marriage. And the leadership there says, this is a civil matter. We won't get involved. And I had to remind them of the truth that it's not a civil matter. It's a soul matter. You have 4 souls that are in jeopardy here. And I stopped going to church because of that. So fast forward back going into, becoming a therapist, I realized about 2009 that I wanted to shift gears in my life. And so I reread scripture and things like that. And part of it that I like is that immersion or baptism saves you, not the removal from dirt from the flesh, but a good appeal conscience to God. I wanted that clean conscience by being baptized.
The clean slate. Yes.
So I began that clean slate in my life in 2009, and I went back to college, learned a lot more about myself, attachment disorders, things of this nature.
100%.
And I graduated, and I started shifting from 2012 and from engineering into becoming a therapist, where I ended up working in an inpatient hospital, which was the best thing for me because I learned a lot more.
Because
Now,
the influx of people and how different they were with all the issues, all the colors of the rainbow. I bet you saw everything.
But here's where I want to go with this so that we can end this podcast here, Kenya, is that the internal dialogue is a journey.
Yes.
It's not the destination, it's the journey. And the reason why I said that is because I had to push myself again.
Of course.
You know, this year I went on a cruise. I pushed myself because it was my first cruise, solo cruise. I learned more about myself, which I prompted my own book that's published called The Journey, Not the Destination. I talk about how did I overcome my wounds along my journey? How did I self-heal? So not only do I take experience and therapeutic and spiritualness, it's all combined in this book to help people to realize you can change your stars. You know, I'm having problems remembering this movie, but it's about the first night. It's not the first night. I forgot what it's called. Anyways, it's a great movie about how to change the stars. If we stop focusing on the negativity of our life and start focusing what we said earlier on truth, our internal dialogue changes because our environment changes. We attract better people in our life.
And Steve, I mean, on that note, and as we close this podcast, well, thank you very much to give the listeners such a microscopic view in a fast forward way through your journey of becoming the Steve that is sitting in front of me today. It tells me that it is possible, and it tells me that when I use the word it's perfect, it's whole, you are perfect, you are whole, what I really mean is I accept me as I am right now.
Right.
And tomorrow it will be a different version. It is always evolving as a spiral dynamic. Like there's another layer opened up. It opens up a new layer every time that our consciousness levels up. When you are able to see more, God unveils more. When you're able to go deeper, there you are. But at every level, if you can shift, which you can, right now, as you're listening to this, you have a say in the voices in your head. Is it truth? Is not true? Is that the wound? Is that the wisdom? Is it for me or is it for journaling? Because when you journal, you take outside of your head and now it no longer runs your body. And we can even go deeper and burn that thought. You journal, then you burn it. And it's, thank you. Thank you for the information.
You gave me a great segue into wrapping this up in a nice package. The package is this. When we get burnt by cooking, or we accidentally touch a stove as a kid, we don't want to go near it. We're afraid.
True. There we go.
But as we get older, what do we learn? How to prevent being burnt. And so our journey is the same way. We recognize where we've been burned. I don't remember where I got burned. I might have a little scar here or there where I've gotten burned. But at the same time, I become preventive by using pot holders or being more careful as I place something into the oven. It's the same thing with our life. It's being proactive, being aware, observing, like you said. It's all those things like cooking and being very careful with the ingredients that we have.
And take a stand that you're not a victim of your life. I'm going to be very black and white as we close. You're not a victim of your past. Those experiences are pages in your book of life that help you to become who you are right now. Now, what you do with this information, what you do, who you be in this mirror as you hear this, is up to you.
Great point. We're out of time. God bless and thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope to have you back next week. Until then, be safe
and be kind.